What's going on, guys? Braces here. Today we have a next episode from the Pimp My List edition. This time we will talk about dwarves, which might come as a surprise to some of you since I generally don't like the army, even though it was my first army that I started collecting. But I decided to see if I can reignite the love again a bit and took one of the lists sent to me for a ride. Next episode of Pimp My List will be held in January, so I'll accept the list submissions till the end of December, and out of those lists I will pick one and take it for the ride again. So the main reason why I thought that the dwarves might be an interesting thing to talk about is that this kind of dwarven lists are kind of a phenomenon that is a product of the 9th-age pricing system. This kind of list started coming into play around 2 years ago, and I think it was Goldur actually who took it first. He took it to the Hereford tournament. So I'm definitely proud to present this type of list to you because I think this was an invention coming from my club. I have not been a fan of this abomination, but recently, after playing a game with it and after seeing in more depth how it plays, I'm becoming more and more interested in it. So this is the list from one of the ACS Dwarven viewers. We've actually worked a bit on it since he sent it first before the 205 came out. And this is a bit of a conclusion for what we talked about earlier. And as you can see, it consists of a very heavily MSU-ish list with the copters and the seeker unit to add some punch. So the idea here is to max out the shooting, but also the seekers with the seeker load can add a very significant damage to the unit. The engineer helps either of free war machines, and because of the amount of units there and amount of redirectors, it's pretty hard to get to juicy stuff. And come on, there is really no juicy stuff except for the Seekers unit, right? With a pretty durable army and the +1 to the casting value for the spells for the opponent, this list is very durable and pretty hard to score high against. This kind of list is a pretty good list for the team tournament since it definitely is an all-taker. But as Goldur constantly shows on our single tournaments, it can also score very well on the singles. So I'm not going to present you something that is a strict improvement to the list since I've worked on it before, and I can say that there is much to develop in the direction that has been taken. I want to show you an alternative that I actually played. So the changes are not that significant, but the two things that I would like to point out is the core change. You exchange the 1 Greybirds unit for 2 very cheap Warriors units. I think that 2 Greybirds units are enough to get all the panic bubbles you need. Also, the Seekers got changed to 2 units of Kingsguard, and the Catapult got changed to Organ Gun, and the Ballista got changed to Attack Bomber. So what is the idea behind those changes? I wanted to make the lists more like the Saurian Ancients used to play. So with this core setup, you can flee much more. Also, Kingsguard can flee while the Seekers cannot. An additional bomber helps with positioning as well. You have 10 scoring units here, so except for flags, you are a bit better. And with the ridiculously cheap units of Kingsguard, you can actually countercharge enemies very, very well. If you can take the charge on one unit and even allow your opponent to overrun into other one, then countercharge with Kingsguard can definitely be devastating. The war machine setup is a bit different, because if I have an engineer, I want him to be able to support 2 different types of war machines. And I think that organ gun and cannon fulfill the most distinct roles and have the most impact on the game from all the Dwarven war machines. So being able to switch between helping one of them is a very interesting concept that I really liked. Other alternatives that you can try to put in your list, and I know they were tested already and marked as good, were the Vengeance Seekers and the Flame Cannons. The army struggles a bit against big infantry units, so the Flame Cannons try to mitigate that. And Vengeance Seekers are very, very cheap chaff units that can also deal some damage before dying. I think that the mix-up of the 2 lists I mentioned and the Vengeance Seekers and Flame Cannons should be an ideal dwarfish MSU list, and the pick of specific units is only your matter of preferences. I chose the King's Guard and different core setup, mostly because I like the double flee mechanic, and I think this is the army that actually can utilize this the best from the whole system. While Leadership 9 rallies can be really frightening, I think they are not that bad, and the concept is definitely worth trying. So as promised, I played a game with this, and I will present you now how it went. So I played against the Empire of Sonstol list, which consisted of, from the left, 5 Reiters, 13 Electoral Cavalry with 2 heroes inside, 3 Demigryphs, the Wizard on Arcane Engine, 15 Crossbowmen, 17 Crossbowmen with Artificer, the big Imperial Guard unit, 20 Heavy Infantry, the Cannon, 21 Flagellants, and 10 Militia. So I would like to point out that some mistakes in my opponent's deployment. His cavalry unit, as positioned here, is pretty sure to make no impact on the game whatsoever, since it is very, very far from any action. While we were deploying the unit by one after another, at the end I decided to drop all and take the first turn, and he had certainly his cavalry unit and his Imperial Guard unit left. And while the cavalry unit now is positioned very safely, it also is a massive point sink. And in this matchup, he managed to give out the whole initiative. So this is actually very bad when you're playing against this dwarf MSU-ish list. You have to try to push it more into the corner and force it to flee, because if you don't, you will see what can happen in this game. The Arcane Engine is also positioned very weirdly, because while it is very far from the cannon, it is not over 60 inches, and the Arcane Engine had no ward save. So for example, switching the position of Arcane Engine and the cavalry could maybe help the cavalry to get faster into the game, and would prevent Arcane Engine from suffering from cannon fire. The Flagellants and Militia are positioned very weirdly. While they were positioned as one of the first units, the Imperial Guard didn't follow, because as they stand now, Imperial Guards are over 30 inches from the organ gun, but the Flagellants are well within 30 inches. So actually I don't really care that he positioned his Imperial Guard over 30 inches, because I might as well shoot at the Flagellants instead. So after my first turn, I moved everything up because he allowed me to. The units on the left are actually positioned in such manner that for each of the units, the crossbowman unit is on the flank. So actually this is hard cover. With the old cover rules, I wouldn't be able to do that, because clearly he can see vast majority of my units, without any blockage, but since my flank is glued to the hill for the most forward dwarf unit, he has to shoot at hard cover, which will probably prevent him from doing any damage. The white units are greybeards, and they have 6 inches to every unit. So I am also not afraid of the panic checks that I will need to make. After his first turn, he moved as follows. And I would again like to point out at the position of the cavalry, it moved very slightly up, trying to counter the Grudgebuster. In the picture here you can see that the Grudgebuster has 3 wounds inflicted, but actually it was only 2 wounds, since we checked afterwards that he didn't have the range for the one of his spells to reach my Grudgebuster. So the cavalry, again, a huge point sink there. The Demigryph Knights are also positioned pretty weird, because now I can put most of my dwarf units from the left side out of the line of sight of Demigryph Knights and effectively prevent him from moving more up on this flank. If I were him, I would much rather accept a flank charge from the Grudgebuster, because if I flank charge his Demigryphs with my Grudgebuster, he would be very likely to stick and counter charge me with his Knights, which would mean the dead Grudgebuster. The Imperial Guard here is still positioned over 30 inches from the Organgan, but this only means that my gameplay is very safe here, and that I can still just murder the Flagellants and push my units up even more. I got a bit lucky in this turn, since his cannon managed to hit my Grudgebuster, but didn't wound, which definitely helped me with advancing forward. So this is the situation after my turn 2. From the left, my Grudgebuster managed to hide behind the impassable, such that his Demigryphs with 1 wheel couldn't make it to charge my Grudgebuster, which is another thing that he missed. As I said, I could have put the 3 units of dwarfs on the hill in the manner that he cannot charge me with his Demigryphs, and he either doesn't move up or moves up and gets charged by me. Only one of the units of miners unfortunately managed to go out and inflicted only 1 wound to the cannon. If it managed to inflict the average 3 wounds, I would be able to kill the cannon with the Gyros shooting, but since it wasn't able to, I will be forced to take another round of cannon fire, unfortunately because of my opponent's positioning of units, and the fact there is a guy in the 4th rank of the crossbowmen. If he doesn't move his crossbowmen, my miners will be able to overrun into the rear of the crossbowmen. So after his second turn, as you can see, he doesn't correct his positioning. So if I will be able to charge the cannon and kill it, I will have a free rear charge into the crossbowman, possibly killing his unit. As you can see, the knights still haven't moved up much. This is the second turn, and they are still basically in the same position. Additionally, his Demigryph Knights moved into the position that I can charge them with Kingsguard. I will very likely kill them, and the distance between Kingsguard and the Knights is huge. It's around 14 inches, so I will be very free to just flee if he decides to charge me. So his units will again probably do nothing on this side of the field. One more thing that I would like to point out is the positioning of the heavy infantry on the right. If I manage to get a charge off with the Kingsguard and the Grudgebuster, I will actually be able to position my units in such manner that the King's Guard will overrun into the flank of the Imperial Guard. Fortunately for him, my opponent realizes that and decides to flee with the heavy infantry. Unfortunately for him, I pass the redirect check with the Grudgebuster and make an 8-to-roll charge with the Grudgebuster into the flank of the crossbowmen. Unfortunately, the miners can't get through the cannon since it passes the leadership 4 check. The King's Guard can't kill the Demigryph Knights, but with the positioning of the Knights unit, he cannot make it into the King's Guard with one wheel only, so the Knights are useless yet again. The Grudgebuster is out of their line of sight, so for another turn the Knights will be stuck there. He finally decides to move up a bit. The Imperial Guards decide to charge the King's Guard. That failed the charge into the lake, and I happily flee, because now I will be able to charge the Imperial Guard from both sides. The Arcane Engine is positioned such that after my miners manage to finally kill the cannon, I can charge him in the rear. And the Knights, while tried to charge the warriors on a pretty high roll, didn't manage to make it because I obviously fled. So this is the testament to how the army will play usually. If this would happen on turn 1 or turn 2, I might have been a bit more in trouble, especially if this was much closer to my own board edge. But since I'm very far from my board edge, I can easily flee as many times as I want, and his knights will never be able to charge again. And at some point, I might be able to get the flank charge from both Grudgebusters, which probably would be deadly. So after my turn 4, when I managed to kill the wizard on the engine, managed to get a flank charge on the flank and recharge on the Imperial Guard, and position my rest army as follows. He decided to surrender here. This would be his 4th turn, and the Knights would again do nothing. It would be pretty likely that the Knights unit will be the only unit left for him at the end of the game. But since I have not lost any units so far, and I don't think that I would lose any more, I would say that was a very safe massacre. I think his biggest mistake was allowing me to push him and move aggressively forward, because the worst situation for this type of army list is when it is pushed far to his board edge, because then every flee makes you lose a unit. Since this army has so many units, and the positioning of those units in the first turn don't matter that much, I would say that it might be pretty wise to just deploy everything you can against this army and start pushing forward from the very beginning. This should give you the biggest chance at forcing the dwarf players to lose some units and to sacrifice some units, because in the slow positional game it is very hard to win against this army and very hard to earn any points. I would say that there are a few units that are a shining brilliance of this army, and definitely miners are one of them. The setup is very expensive at 265 points, but the musician, shields and throwing weapons are pretty much a must on the miners and help you a lot with the scenarios and to force opponent to be much more careful about leaving his back exposed. The miners obviously work not only in this list, but in practically every dwarves list. So I would be surprised if I would see a good dwarven list without any miners. The other unit I want to point out are Grudgebusters. While they are pretty frail, their speed, the shooting capabilities and the fighting capabilities make them, in my opinion, one of the most interesting units in the dwarf army. And I think that if you have points left, then bringing at least one can help you cover your flanks in a very significant way. As you can see, in this game, my opponent was pretty scared of the Grudge Buster that I've left purposely on the left side. And this might have been one of the reasons why he put his cavalry there. For me, if my Grudge Buster can force my opponent to play more defensively because he's afraid of his flanks, it is definitely worth it. While I'm still not sure about the Kingsguard unit, I think they are very resilient here. And with the opponent not really having time to shoot at them, reaching the close combat in their full capabilities can really turn the tides of battle. With the amount of chaff you have in the list, it shouldn't be that hard to get the charge off. And with strength 7 and a lot of weapon skill 5 attacks, they can really deplete even the most dangerous enemy units. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and see you in the next one. Cheers!